Okay, so on my Instagram, you guys asked for me to read Kylie Jenner's chart, and this is a fun idea, so let's just get into it. I pulled up her chart on astro.com, and I'm going to take you through a basic natal chart reading. And this will be really effective for people who are interested in learning astrology themselves, because it will give you an example of how I make the interpretations. We'll talk about all the general significations and how you can see how her life is plainly expressed based on the energies in her chart. And it's a pretty fun one. So you can see on the screen right now, I'm sharing her natal chart. She was born on August 10th, 1997. So she's a Leo sun. Is anyone surprised by this? Is anyone surprised by the fact that Kylie Jenner is a Leo sun who likes to be in the spotlight and is the center of attention? We'll get to that. But anyway, let's first start with her rising sign. So she is a Capricorn rising. Her ascendant is at 9 degrees. People who are Capricorn rising are extremely ambitious, extremely hardworking, can be a little bit cautious and concerned with doing the right thing. This is a sign that is ruled by Saturn traditionally. So they're all about structure, discipline, hard work, challenge, and they typically get better over time. They have great ambition for being at the top of whatever chosen hierarchy they have. So in the native zodiac, Capricorn occupies the 10th house. So this is all about climbing the career ladder, being on the top of your game, and being in a position of authority. So that is typically what we see with Capricorn rising. The normal traits that you might also associate with Capricorn, like typically being more reserved, quiet, a little bit over rigid, I see those things as being balanced by her sun sign in Leo, because Leo is extremely enthusiastic and exuberant, full of life, fun, creative, generous. And so that rigid, over conventional nature that we typically see with Capricorns is somewhat balanced by that sun in Leo. And I tend to notice that with most people's natal charts, is that they have a lot of balancing factors that seem too perfect to be coincidence. So we'll put it like that. But the other thing about Capricorn rising that is really important is that Capricorns typically have a pretty low emotional access. So they feel really deeply, but they have a hard time confronting it. They don't want to acknowledge their emotions. And inherently, there is sort of a weak self-esteem and a lack of confidence. Now, you might not obviously see that right on the face of Kylie Jenner's personality, being that she is such a big, exuberant, lively personality from that Leo sun. But there are several indications in this chart that we'll get into that would suggest that she is someone who maybe won't even recognize her own accomplishments and has a hard time accepting compliments from other people as being the truth. And there's a number of reasons for that as well, because she's a Scorpio moon. But you know, this is someone whose confidence will be wavering, usually in certain areas of life. Like, she'll be confident that she can achieve everything she wants to in her career, and she's got that on lock, but she will not be so confident that she can maintain a happy and healthy, stable, romantic relationship, for example. So that's one of the things that we typically see with Capricorns, particularly Capricorn rising. This is someone who needs to learn to make time for rest, exercise, and a spiritual life to avoid the natural pessimism that is prominent with Capricorns. But again, that's of course balanced by the overwhelming optimism of a Leo sun. So, you know, I don't really know what her personal routine is like. We're going to be talking about some things that might not be so obvious on the outside from her very public life. But you can see also that she has Neptune in her first house. So the first house represents the physical body, the perspective on life, the outlook on life, and planets that are in the first house tend to have a huge impact on the life of the person, the perspective of the person, because it's such a prominent, crucial axis of the chart that informs the entire life. So it's not in a conjunction with her ascendant, you know, it's far away at 28 degrees, but it's still going to have an influence, because Neptune is that cloudy, confusion energy, right? It veils things. It's hard to get a foot on even ground, right? Because this is Neptune ruling Pisces, a water sign. So this is also something that tends to make the self-image very unclear to the individual when you see Neptune in the first house. So this is another indication that there's something going on with her self-confidence that makes it easy for her to maybe take the easy way out of conflict because she doesn't really have a clear picture on herself. It can be something that makes it hard for her to really see how much she has accomplished in life and to see herself honestly in that way. Neptune, it makes a trine to Venus in the 9th house of Virgo. So a trine is usually a harmonious aspect in astrology. This is a 120-degree aspect that means that the energies work well together. And Venus represents love, beauty, relationships, harmony. But remember, I said beauty, right? And Neptune is known for representing creativity, creative insight, especially the visual arts. So the trine to Venus in her 9th house is obviously an indication that her creativity is enhanced, especially when it comes to having an eye for beauty and luxury. And you can obviously see that in what she does in the world. Venus rules her 5th house of hobbies, passions, pleasure, creative projects, and romance, because Venus is the ruler of Taurus, and that's what the 5th house represents. And it also rules her 10th house. Venus is also the ruler of Libra, Libra being the sign of beauty, harmony, luxury, peace, balance. So this is someone who's definitely hyper concerned with maintaining peace among her relationships, and her intuition from Neptune gives her an awareness of everyone's emotions, particularly the romantic partner as well as her children. But what is so obvious about this is that, you know, Venus rules her 5th and 10th house. So she's able to turn her creative pursuit, beauty, literally a Venus theme, into a very public career that does very well, right? And that in beauty, and that is in Libra. So that one's pretty obvious right there. But Venus is in its fall in Virgo, okay? So that's pretty interesting. That's, I think, probably what's going to give her that lack of clarity around how to have a happy relationship life, combined with the fact that, you know, you've got Capricorn rising and Neptune there, kind of making the waters a bit murky. This is traditionally an indication that she will eventually settle down and fall in love with someone from a foreign culture or live abroad with her partner, because the 9th house rules foreign travel, foreign cultures. And when Venus is there, it can typically mean those things. But maybe a more literal interpretation of that energy right now is that she obviously travels quite a bit because of work, because Venus is associated with her 5th and 10th house. So her passion, you know, she's probably very passionate about travel and exploration of other cultures. And it will be interesting to see what she does with her partner down the road. And if there's any 9th house themes related to who she eventually ends up with in the long term, if anyone, right? So that's traditionally what it means anyway. She's probably going to be a pretty laid back person. You know, Leo in being her sun sign and Venus being in Virgo in the 9th house will typically make her laid back, but probably prone to worry. And she's probably also prone to putting her partner on a pedestal, which would leave her disappointed in love quite often. She'll have a lot of compassion. She'll see things with sort of rose-colored glasses. That's that Neptune influence through the trine to Venus there. She only wants to see the good in her partners, and that can often leave her pretty disappointed. It can make her literally delusional in love, and or she can attract deceitful partners. I don't know if she ever got cheated on. Somebody will have to tell me. I'm not up to speed with all the details of Kylie Jenner's life, but that's what that can do. She can attract deceitful partners, or she could be lying to herself about, you know, what the truth is regarding her partner. So if anybody really keeps up to date with her and Travis, it'd be interesting to see if that would resonate for Kylie Jenner. But Neptune, let's go back to Neptune in the 1st house, also makes a square to Mars in the 10th house. This is associated with displays of anger in childhood and trauma, abuse, and sometimes alcoholism in the family. And I made a note of that one because if you've ever watched Keeping Up with the Kardashians, you would know that Kris Jenner sure does like to have her evening wine. So I don't know if alcoholism is really a thing in the family there, but there's certainly some indications in the chart that would suggest that, you know, traditionally that's what we see in astrology, that a square to Mars from Neptune can lead to sort of escapism. That can sometimes mean alcoholism or drug abuse that was present in her family growing up. And being that Mars rules the fourth house, Aries, this is obviously related to themes of her parents and her home growing up, because that is the domain of the fourth house. Being that Mars is in her 10th house, this is someone who will often take action on somebody else's passions or ideas, and then later on realize that it is not what she wanted, or it wasn't even her own idea, and then have to like clean up that mess later, because Neptune Neptune makes it difficult to see through illusion when it's in a square to Mars like that, being in the 10th house. So, she's got people around her all the time in support of her businesses, and I'm sure they're throwing ideas at her all the time that maybe she picks up speed and runs with them, and then is later like, I don't even want this, That's highly likely when you've got Neptune in the square to Mars. There can also be a bit of discomfort with authority. So I would see this as being an indication of imposter syndrome. And she's got so many indications of that already, because what I said about the Capricorn rising, this is someone who doesn't always have a ton of confidence in themselves. And because she has such a great position of power and authority at such a young age, she's a leader of a massive business. Being that she is so young, she's probably someone who kind of feels like a phony on the inside, or struggles with a lot of imposter syndrome. And that definitely happens when Mars is inhibited, like it is with the square from Neptune in her case. This can also sometimes lead to autoimmune diseases and allergies and inflammation. And I know that runs in the family, like Kim has skin rashes and stuff like that, psoriasis. This is definitely from overworking. She has many indications of overworking, but when you've got Mars in the 10th house, you're just go, 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 go in the pursuit of your public reputation and your career, because those are 10th house themes. But overall, this will give a talent for having a great long-term vision and being able to turn that vision into action immediately, because Neptune is the planet of dreams and fantasies and visions, and Mars is the planet of action, motivation, realization. So she can have these big ideas and she can put them in place right away. And, Mars, being that it rules Aries, is the planet of quick start ideas. So she's not necessarily the one to follow through with the action steps. And that's probably not the case, right? Because she's got a massive team, but she definitely has ideas and can see the way to make them happen. So being that her rising sign is Capricorn, that makes her chart ruler Saturn. And so the chart ruler is obviously going to have a huge impact on the chart overall, and its placement has a lot to do with the personality and the way her life plays out. So her chart ruler Saturn is in the 4th house of Aries. So when the ruler of the first is in the 4th, this is a very direct and literal translation of the family being extremely influential on the personality and on the identity, right? So that's obviously the case for Kylie Jenner. I don't think she would be who she is today if it weren't for the position of authority that her family already had in the industry that she now is obviously quite dominant in. So that is something that often happens. When you look at someone maybe who's not famous, right? Another way that this energy can play out is that the family life, for one reason or the other, is extremely important for the identity. And that can be for good or bad. But you can see how that energy plays out with Kylie Jenner very easily. Saturn actually also in traditional astrology rules Aquarius. In modern astrology, Uranus is the ruler, but before we had discovered those outer planets, Saturn was thought to be the ruler of Aquarius, and she has Aquarius here in the 2nd house, where Jupiter is involved, and obviously there's a great deal of wealth that can be made when you have Jupiter in the 2nd house, because Jupiter expands and brings good fortune. It's the great benefic. The 2nd house is the house of finances. Saturn being the ruler there, I would say, means that the ruler of the 1st and the 4th means that the family had some money that helped assist her in her path through this lifetime, being that Saturn also rules the 2nd house. And the family is obviously of great influence. So Saturn is in conjunct. So before I move on there, let's talk about how Saturn is opposing Mars, right? So Saturn in opposition to Mars is someone who is definitely a workaholic, someone who just can't stop and has the challenge to integrate the energies of having all of these ideas and wanting to get started on them all the time, but needing to put in place the structure and the discipline to follow through. And because Saturn is about our responsibilities, it's about the hard work, it's about seeing things through over time. Saturn rules time. And Mars is all about that fast start. So there is a dichotomy there that her life is focused on integrating those two energies. And we would have to hear from her to see if she feels that that's true. But that's what you would see when you've got Mars in opposition to Saturn. This can also make it a challenge to figure out what her work-life balance is going to be, because it's the axis in which it's happening is the 10th and the 4th house, the home and the career. So she probably has struggled with that and might continue to struggle with that. Oppositions aren't necessarily bad, though, if we can integrate the energy. I would suspect that this one is going to be a challenge for Kylie over a long time, just because it's happening between the two malefic planets, Mars and Saturn. Saturn is also making an in conjunction to Venus and also the North Node. And so when that happens, there's a tendency to withhold information and a lack of confidence in her ability to communicate, or a need to over communicate or prove her intelligence to everyone. And you can see that because what that happens is, with that, it's because in her childhood, Saturn represents authority, figures of authority, and specifically the father. So this can be due to sort of being received with indifference by the figures of authority in her life, or her father, being criticized a lot, or being met with impatience by her family, or perhaps sort of like an abandonment wound, because it can mean that the family wasn't really present. And you can imagine how that would be the case, being that they're all so busy all the time and they have such prominent roles in society. But that creates this huge need to prove oneself that is in alignment with the imposter syndrome themes that we've already discussed. And it makes people sort of withhold information out of secrecy, which I think is probably definitely the case because of that Scorpio moon. Scorpio is extremely secretive. Scorpio is suspicious and distrustful of other people. Saturn also makes you take on too much responsibility when it's in conjunction, because Saturn rules responsibility. So this is someone with, Venus and Virgo, Venus being the planet of relationships, and Virgo, and it's at its fall in Virgo, which is the sign of service in the name of others. It's the sign that wants to give to other people and to make sure other people's needs are met and that problems are solved. So Saturn is going to motivate her here to take on far too much responsibility for other people, perhaps to the point of maybe ignoring her own responsibilities or never giving herself time to rest. And it's because of this drive inside that makes her feel like she needs to prove her intelligence or prove herself and that she's capable. So it's all those imposter syndrome themes. That means, she really wasn't getting the right amount of attention in her childhood. And there was also, of course, a need to grow up early. That's another thing that is common when you see Saturn in conjunction, because Saturn rules time and age. But when it's debilitated by an in conjunction or a quincunx, what happens then is that there's this pressure to grow up early. And I think that, you could see that was the case because of their public personas, and the need to be very, very aware of your reputation at a young age would pressure you to grow up. And because the North Node is involved in this in conjunction as well, the nodes they're markers of the eclipses, and therefore they represent fated energies. This is about her destiny. So whatever happened to her in childhood means that, it's directly related to the position she's supposed to take on through life and the lessons that she's here to learn. The other thing about the early childhood experience being that, she's got Saturn and Mars in this opposition, plus these in conjunctions and the need to prove, the absent parents. Typically what this would indicate, especially with the fourth house being occupied by Aries, is that there was a lot of movement in the home, good and bad, probably a lot of frustration, whether that frustration is pent up and expressed maybe passive aggressively, but this is a home where there was potentially quite a bit of anger and conflict. So we don't really know what it was like, but you know, behind the scenes when the cameras were off, but this is definitely an indication of that. And it's also a sign that there was, you know, maybe a bit of sibling rivalry. And that's pretty common with this, because she's got Mercury here in the mix as well. And Mercury is making some inconjunctions. There's boundary issues. Saturn rules boundaries. So yeah, that goes back to the taking on too much responsibility and needing to learn the lessons of, you know, responsibility and self-love there. So let's see, where else are we going? Oh yeah. I was going to say that this one is also common for sibling rivalry, being that Mercury is the ruler of the third house in the native zodiac, and the third house rules our siblings, extended family, and the early childhood environment. So Mercury is in this in conjunction here. It's in a close, it's near the North Node and Venus, making sort of a wide conjunction, and then also in that in conjunction to Jupiter. So, you know, typically that means there's a lot of sibling rivalry that makes you feel like you need to like measure up and prove yourself. Saturn's involvement is also about measurement, markers of success. So the other thing about the combination of the fourth house having Saturn and Aries energy is like, this is someone who the household environment had like military-like discipline, right? Because Aries rules war, fighting, militia. Saturn is discipline and hard work. So there's probably expectations that the children worked extremely hard. You can see that coming from Kris Jenner. They're constantly talking about the work ethic that she has and that she instills in the children, and that they all work extremely hard, even if it, you know, maybe doesn't look like it on their reality show. Let's move back to the second house in Aquarius a little bit, because Aquarius rules the 11th house in the native zodiac. And so the 11th house is related to groups, wider audiences, our social networks. It also rules technology and social media. So the fact that the second house is occupied by Aquarius with Uranus, its ruler in modern astrology, which gives it sort of like a power boost, means that the way in which she generates income for herself is pretty plainly explained through the use of social media and connecting with large networks and audiences, because Jupiter is here to expand those themes. She's also probably someone who, you know, really at the end of the day has a desire to do really good things with her money for the world, because Aquarian energy is very humanitarianistic, or is that even a word, and altruistic. And so she's got this sextile here between Jupiter and Saturn. So I imagine that this is, you hear my cat? She always likes to join for videos. Please hold. Come see everyone. Yes. All right. Say hello. Okay. It's video number 2 that she's done that. So I think I was talking about that sextile between Jupiter and Saturn in the 4th house. So this is about money matters here, where she can see great success and expansion in her finances. Now you're gonna make me sneeze, cat. And I'm not editing this video, so everyone's gonna see it. So I was talking about the Jupiter sextile to Saturn that we see right here. So what I see for this is that, you know, with sextiles, it really needs to be activated by our intention. They don't really work as easily and seamlessly and flawlessly as trines do. Sextiles require that we take advantage of an opportunity that is presented to us versus just energy that's going to benefit us, you know, whether we do anything or not. And so when you've got Jupiter in a sextile to Saturn in the 4th house, and Saturn is the chart ruler, the influence of the family and the authority of figures in her life can provide her the much needed boost that she needs to expand on her financial potential. That's the Jupiter in the 2nd house, if she is willing to accept their support. And she's got that opposition to the sun in the 8th house of Leo, right? And the 8th house are themes around joint finances, inheritances, money that comes in from the outside. It's also the house of our psychological wounds and deep traumas. So there is an energy to integrate here around Leo's need to do it on its own and be a leader shining bright. And will you take the helpful hand from your family? Will you leverage the leg up that you have based on the position of your family, chart ruler in the 4th house? So she obviously had to, probably make peace with what that would mean for her inside and psychologically. And if she hasn't made peace with it yet, that's going to be a lifetime theme. And you could see why that would play out in her self-confidence or her imposter syndrome, or feeling sort of like she has an overinflated identity. And that's really because, she had this, the question she's probably asking herself is, would I have been able to accomplish all of this if it weren't for my family? Is this something that I can own as being my own achievement in society, or am I really just a phony because it's really all because of my family? So that's her psychological challenge to integrate there, and that can be tough for Leo, because Leo is constantly seeking the validation and the approval and the praise of other people. But she's never going to really accept it as true until she integrates those energies. So that's what you see with the 2nd house. And the other thing about the 2nd house is it's not just related to money, but it's also related to our confidence, self-esteem, and our relationship with our body, and what we put in our body and how we treat our body. So please hold. The cat wants out now. Okay. So moving on, we are going to move on to the moon in Scorpio. And so the moon in Scorpio is someone whose emotions are on tap very easily. Scorpio is a water sign. It's deeply psychic. It's ruled by Pluto. And it's also ruled by Mars. So there is great emotional intensity that is available to the person, and it tends to work in extremes. But Scorpio is also distrustful and suspicious, which is why she's probably got a great deal of challenge with romantic relationships, because she doesn't want to let her guard down. And that Capricorn rising doesn't really have as fluid of emotions as she would like. So there's this desire to shove down her emotions and not acknowledge them from the Capricorn rising, but the powerful intensity of her true emotional nature, which is the moon in Scorpio. So overreaction is a huge possibility here. She wants to stuff it down, and then it all comes out at once. And that's especially true because the moon is squaring the sun. So that is going to lead to, huge explosive reactions from that sun energy in Leo, right? Emotional reactions that make you the center of attention. And also it's squaring Jupiter. So that is literally another, Scorpio overreacts on its own, but squaring Jupiter, that's the expansion of the emotional reactions, good and bad, right? So when something great happens, she's extremely enthusiastic. And when something bad happens, she's going to try to stuff it down, but it's going to come out. And when it does, it's going to be huge. So that's really something that I see her here with her moon placement. What else is interesting about this moon placement is because it's in the 11th house, and the 11th house rules social networks, our networks at large, our relationship to groups in society. And wherever the moon is, especially when it's high in the chart, high in the sky, this is a sign that this is where you're going to really have this is what you're going to be known for in society, right? Like if you've got moon in the 10th house, you tend to have a good reputation with your career and really make your name from your career. And when you've got your moon in the 11th house, these are people who are well regarded among their social networks and have a big presence among their social networks, which is obviously true being that she's famous. You see famous people having the moon in the 11th and 10th house very often. The other thing about the moon being in Scorpio is that the moon rules motherhood, quite literally. It's that nurturing energy, and it rules the 7th house in her chart. It rules Cancer. She literally kept her pregnancy secret. There is no more of a moon in Scorpio expression than keeping your entire pregnancy completely secret from the entire world. Moon ruling pregnancy, Scorpio being the most secretive sign on the planet. So I thought that that was a pretty funny direct translation of her energies. So, yeah, what else did I want to say? Yeah, she's also making a square to Uranus, which makes her have sort of like a rebellious nature about her that probably comes out when she's angry and feeling distrustful in her relationships, that she wants to sort of rebel against what, she's told to do or what she thinks she should do or be in relationship. But she does have a sextile to Mercury in Virgo, and Mercury is at home in the sign of Virgo. It rules Virgo. And so this helps her by contributing a sense of clear, logical, rational, detail-oriented thought that helps her, piece together what's actually happening in a very grounded Earth-like way, right? Because Virgo is an Earth sign. But she will have to call on that with intention again because it's a sextile. So I would expect that probably wouldn't come until she is older in life and has learned to integrate some of these other challenging squares and oppositions. So let's see, what else did I want to tell you? Okay, so let's talk about Libra in the 10th house more directly. I mean, obviously Libra rules beauty and what is beautiful and harmonious, and the pleasures and physical appearance and senses and touch. And so that is very obvious that she has made a career quite literally out of a very Libran theme, beauty and luxury. Her lifestyle of luxury is something that is very much so a part of her business, right? So that's how she gets her claim to fame. And she's got the MC, the midheaven, the angle in her chart that represents career and public reputation at the anaretic degree. The anaretic degree is the 29th degree of a sign, and that takes the energy to the fullest possible expression. So she is obviously taking her career with that Libra energy to the fullest extent of its potential. And that's what happens when you see any angle or planet at the 29th anaretic degree. It's like you're really squeezing that energy for all that it has to give before it transitions on to the next sign. Conjunct Mars, that gives her obviously a lot of motivation to work, a lot of energy to work. She has a great deal of energy, and so that's another indication for that, workaholic, can't stop working, can't stop thinking about it, can't stop achieving about it. And that was a learned behavior from childhood, being that she's got that 4th house Aries energy. She also has Chiron here, and so Chiron is an asteroid that sort of represents our biggest core wounds and where we can go on to serve as a healer in life. But many astrologers believe that the degree of Chiron sort of represents the age at life in which something big shifts, whether there is a huge occurrence in her life that kind of like changes the whole course of her life, or a big realization about her trauma. Her Chiron is at 27 degrees in the sign of Libra. So I think, this is going to be a moment. It's conjunct Mars, right? So it's literally at the same degree of Mars. Mars representing the planet of anger, the planet of our motivations, our achievements, its frustrations. It's making that opposition to Saturn. This could be a number of things, and we're really not going to know how this plays out until she is 27. This could be where she realizes that the career that she started, because of that Neptune influence in the 1st house, was maybe not what she wanted, and it was just overly influenced by the work that her family does in the world, and that can come into play with the opposition. This could be along the lines of, balancing work and home life because she gets really sick or something like that, because Mars is, also the ruler of her 11th house, because it traditionally rules Scorpio as well before we discovered Pluto. This is something that's probably going to be pretty public because Chiron's in the 10th house, and Mars, that conjunction to Mars, rules the 11th house of social networks and has that opposition, and also rules, areas in the 4th house. So something related to her family and home life is probably going to be made public. That sort of changes the course of her life and has to do with her core wounds and how she can go on to further heal and contribute, positive outcomes for society. So we'll see what happens to Kylie Jenner when she's 27. It's definitely going to have to do with her reputation, though, that's for sure. Last planet, Pluto in Sagittarius. This is someone who is probably pretty obsessive about religion in one way or the other. And the reason why I say this is because she might completely reject religion and take a completely atheistic point of view, or want nothing to do with religion and spirituality, the 12th house sort of ruling spirituality. Pluto is extremely obsessive and compulsive, and it takes things to extreme. So there's either deep diving into spirituality that's happening in secret, right? Because the 12th house is the house of secrecy. Pluto is the planet of secrecy. She's a Scorpio moon. It's also the house of our subconscious, what we do when we're alone, what we do behind the scenes. So this is something we're not going to be able to see visibly, because she is doing this quite literally in a 12th house way. So behind the scenes, someone who is either deeply researching spirituality. I remember one time she posted on her stories about, this was a long time ago, she posted about, what do you call that? When the planes leave like chemtrails in the sky. She was like into some conspiracy theory stuff. And that would be a very Pluto and Sagittarius theme, because Sagittarius is concerned with higher philosophies, religion, and spirituality. And Pluto is like obsessive and diving into the occult. Pluto is about the occult. Pluto rules death. Pluto rules taboo topics. So whatever she is into behind the scenes is probably, pretty out there or conspiracy theory in nature, right? And she's probably really intense about it. When she experiences endings in her life of any kind, they're probably pretty dramatic, or at least very intense on the inside. So when there's a death, when there's, an ending of a certain role in society, it's rather dramatic. And she's probably prone to intense periods of introspection. Finally, I'd like to talk about her 7th house. It's Cancer, ruled by the moon. So, she's got a lot of indications that there's trouble forming intimate relationships here. We've talked about that Scorpio moon, which is very distrustful. We've talked about Capricorn having like low emotional access and a lack of confidence. We've talked about these inconjunctions here, and the afflictions that she has to her planet Venus, Neptune's role in this configuration. And so the moon, being the ruler of her 7th house, is probably someone she's going to meet through her wider network, being that the moon is in the 11th house. And she's going to have a really, she needs someone who is attuned to her emotional nature and wants to protect her, right? Because that's what the Cancer energy is all about. It rules the 4th house in the native zodiac, the home, family, the property. So she really is looking for someone who can help her feel safe to let out her true emotional nature, because she is so distrusting on the inside and struggles with intimacy and bonds. So she needs, a man that is very aware of those emotional needs and wants to do everything to protect and nurture those emotional needs. So that is my reading of Kylie Jenner's chart. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments below whose chart you want me to read next. See you next time.